So we start with 1,000 grams of flour. Bread flour is the best. It's higher gluten. If you don't have bread flour, unbleached um, all-purpose flour will work just as fine. Take the 2 teaspoons of yeast, sprinkle it over the top. There's a tablespoon of salt sprinkled over the top. I'm going to grab the whisk to mix these 3 ingredients together. They don't have to be mixed thoroughly or completely. It's just to get some of the yeast and salt into the bottom of the flour before the water gets added. Next comes the 850 grams of water. It's really important to weigh your ingredients. The ratios are not the same if you measure them by weight. It accounts for how much humidity is in the air and how much moisture the flour is holding based on the humidity in the air. So this is an 85% hydration rate. It's 850 grams of water to 1,000 grams of flour. If this is too much bread for you, you can certainly cut the recipe in half and make 2 loaves. I have to make 4 because this works good. I'm using this spatula to get everything incorporated. I want to get all of the dry ingredients mixed in so that there's no powdery flour left over. You'll see as I'm flipping it over, there's a little bit sticking on the bottom. I'm going to flip that over a few more times to make sure it all gets incorporated. Once it is all incorporated, you're done. That's it. There's no kneading to this bread. Your fingers don't go in it. It's way too sticky and wet to stick your fingers in it in the first place. So once this is done, we're going to cover it with saran wrap, and then it's going to be placed in a warm spot so that it can rise for 1 to 2 hours until it doubles in size. That varies based on how warm it is and the conditions where you have it, what your altitude is, things like that. So covered with plastic wrap, set it into a warm area. You can put it next to a heat register or in a window with sun hitting it. If it's cold, it's just going to take longer, and that's fine. Occasionally I will make a dough like this and let it rise in the refrigerator overnight, and it works just as good. You're not going to hurt it. If it's too cold, it will just take longer. So once it's doubled in volume, it looks like this. We're going to take the wrap off. I'm going to grab the rubber spatula again and flip it over a few times. This will make sure that the ingredients are mixed even more thoroughly and evenly so that the yeast and the salt, the flour and the water all uniformly mixed together. And you can see the gluten strands that have been formed in this already after 2 hours of rising. Once this is done, it's going to get covered up again, and it's going to rise until it triples in volume. And then it goes back in its warm place with the saran wrap over the top. And that can take, again, 1 to 2 hours. On this batch that I'm making here, it actually took an hour and a half to rise it up, but I did have a warm spot to keep it with a heat register today. So off it goes to rise until it triples in volume, and it will fill this bowl. And when you bring it out at this point, you can turn on your oven and preheat to 500 degrees Fahrenheit or 260 degrees Celsius. That's the temperature we're going to bake it at. You do want to have a bowl that's big enough to make sure it doesn't overflow. And I use a little strainer and sift flour out. You can throw it out with your fingers, it doesn't matter. But I want to get a good amount of flour down so that this very wet sticky dough doesn't stick to the bench while I'm getting it shaped into the loaves. I'm going to pour the dough and use the scraper to bring it onto the bench. I don't want to deflate it any more than I have to. So it's be kind of gentle just to get it all out. Again, you can see those long gluten strands that have formed. That's what gives bread its great chew and texture. You'll see when we're done with this bread that it is it's got a great crust and lots of open holes In the bread, that's due to the high moisture content. I again put a little, flour over the top so that it doesn't stick as I'm going to divide it out. You'll see I have 2 bench scrapers there. I'll use one to divide it, and later on we'll use 2 to get it onto the baking sheets. So first we divide it in half. Just push it away from itself so they're not sticking, and then divide each of those in half again, so we'll have 4 loaves. They don't have to be exactly half. I just kind of eye it up, and once they're divided into the individual loaves, I'm going to shape them into the traditional ciabatta shape. If you don't know, ciabatta is an Italian word that means old slipper, and I guess this looks like an old Italian slipper, but that's where the name came from. You saw that I broke it. There was a huge air bubble in the top of it. The loaf in the lower right corner. If I see huge air bubbles, I'll just give them little punctures so that those will deflate. But that's it. They're shaped. So next we get 2 baking sheets. They're lined with parchment paper. I'm going to put 2 loaves on each sheet, and I use 2 bench scrapers to lift them up. Just slide them underneath. The loaf will collapse, and then as you pull the bench scrapers apart, you'll see that it stretches back out, and then I just kind of push it back into shape so it keeps that long oblong shape. That's done. We'll grab the next 2. Same way, if this doesn't go smoothly for you, don't worry about it. It's just with experience, you get to, the shape stays for you better, and it's a nice looking loaf. If they're misshapen, they still taste the same, so it doesn't matter that much. So the oven is preheating to 500 degrees. I'm going to bake it for 25 to 35 minutes. It's done when it's the right color. You rotate the sheets halfway through, and then I switch shelves that they're on. So the ones on an upper shelf, ones on a lower shelf, and I rotate them front to back and top to bottom. And when they hit this color, where see how it gets almost dark brown in that one corner? When that starts to happen, I know that my bread's done. That's the look that I'm going for. I have a raised rack for them to cool on. If you just let them sit, they would sweat because of all the steam that's still in them. And they're actually still cooking while they're cooling, so they're going to cool for 30 to 45 minutes. Depends on the ambient temperature in your room where they're cooling. You don't want to cut into them before that. They need to finish cooking as they cool. So 30 to 45 minutes later, they're ready to slice. And as we cut into this, you'll see the great open texture. It's really chewy. It's wonderful for dipping into olive oil or balsamic vinegar or butter on it, whatever you love. It makes fabulous toast. My bread is always, I slice off what I'm going to eat at one sitting, and then it goes into a Ziploc bag and goes in the freezer. If you let this bread sit out, it's going to go stale quick. So freeze it in between. The other 3 loaves will end up in the freezer. We'll eat this tonight for garlic bread with our lasagna dinner. And that's it. It's that simple to do. If I can do this, you can too.